So the 2021 Booker Prize Longlist has been announced, and many of you have written in to ask me to pass some comment on it and tell you if there are any good contenders. Well, the fact of the matter is I haven't actually seen the longlist yet because I've been too busy reading, rereading and deep reading the great books. I don't really spend too much time reading contemporary writers because I don't often find them too rewarding. I prefer time to do the testing of my literature. You probably already know what my opinion is on the vast majority of book prize winners, whether that's the Booker Prize or the Nobel Prize. I've made videos and I've spoken about it in podcasts a few times, so I'm not a huge fan, but that's not to say that I haven't had a handful of really positive experiences with Booker Prize winners. I can think of two off the top of my head. First was in 2017 when George Saunders' debut novel, Lincoln in the Bardo, came out. In some of the videos you might see the first edition blue hardback copy behind me. I'll do a show-off video of that at some point. Wonderful novel. I got it the day it came out. I've got a really strong memory of sitting down the very day it came out and pairing it with the audio, because the audiobook production of Lincoln in the Bardo is tremendous. Hundreds of actors involved. That's a great novel. I'm actually looking forward to a reread of that very soon. The other Booker Prize winner that's really stayed with me is Life of Pi. I believe was the winner in 2001. That's been on the syllabus for a lot of literature classes in secondary school across England, and for good reason. It's a great book. I remember reading it on a beach in, I believe, Brighton, and just reading that opening and being really taken by the fact that this protagonist could have 3 religions. I remember thinking, you can do that. And every time I go for a swim in a pool, I'm reminded of the main character, Piscine or Pi. So there's definitely some good Booker Prize winners. The funny thing about prize winners is a lot of writers think it's cool to scorn the prizes. You'll see this with the Nobel in particular. There's many writers that say, I will not accept it. It's a rubbish prize. I don't like the criteria. I don't like the judges. And I'm not going to name any names, but when they come knocking at their door, they don't turn it down. So that's a thing. So let's check it out. The Booker Prize longlist for 2021. I'm quite good at determining and putting bets on who the winner is. Indeed, I put a bet on Lincoln in the Bardo to be the winner in 2017, and I was right, so that paid off quite well. What I will say is I'm not hugely well versed in who all the modern contemporary writers are. So let's look at them. Let's see who's on the long list. I think there might be some familiar names, but for me at least there will be a few unfamiliar names. So let's get into it. All right, first things first, let's just read the criteria, the actual announcement. Yeah, so the 13 books on this year's long list were chosen by the 2021 judging panel: historian Maya Jasanoff, writer and editor Horatia Harrod, actor Natasha McElhone, twice Booker shortlisted novelist and Professor Chigozie Obioma, and writer and former Archbishop Rowan Williams. And of course, apologies if I've pronounced anyone's name atrociously. It's something that I'm quite afflicted with. The list was chosen from 158 novels. This is interesting because I'm always kind of curious as to two things. Firstly, who the judges are and what their criteria are for making the decision, and how much do they actually read. Like 158 novels. Is each of these judges, are they each reading all 158? How do you get to that 158? What's the politics involved? What is there any publishers pushing it or paying to get on that list? But 158, can you imagine reading 158 novels? Just those that came out in 1 year across the span of a year? That's some, like, all you would be doing is reading. I know some people are very fast readers, but if we're talking about a prize that rewards aestheticism or appreciates enduring qualities of art, then you probably want to deep read the book, right? You don't want to just speed read it. But hey, maybe these people are very fast readers. That seems like a lot of books to read in a year and doesn't seem to allow any other books that you might be interested in. The list was chosen, yes, from 158 novels published in the UK or Ireland between the 1st of October 2020 and the 30th of September 2021. Here's the thing that I kind of thought when the lockdown started kicking off. I kind of thought, this is going to be good and it's also going to be bad for literature. Good because in any sort of crisis, collective crisis, art usually springs up and takes a radical new direction. So it's always interesting to see what happens. But then again, do we really want a whole slew of lockdown novels? Don't know. Let's see. The Booker Prize for fiction is open to works by writers of any nationality, written in English and published in the UK or Ireland. So they changed it. The Booker Prize, I believe, when it first kicked off, you had to be part of, was it the Commonwealth? I'm not sure, but they've changed that. The 2021 Longlist, or the Booker Dozen, the Booker Dozen, it's like the Baker's Dozen, of 13 novels is, and here comes some awful pronunciation. We're going to look at each and every one of these and read out reviews and talk about what they're about. We've got A Passage North by Anouk Arudprogazm. We've got Second Place by Rachel Cusk, The Promise by Damon Galgut, The Sweetness of Water by Nathan Harris, Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, the first name that I really properly notice or recognise. Kazuo Ishiguro, I read a lot of his stuff. I really liked Never Let Me Go, it was called, and also Remains of the Day, but Never Let Me Go is really good if you like dystopian stuff. A Town Called Solace by Mary Lawson, An Island by Karen Jennings, No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood, The Fortune Men by Nadifa Mohammed, Bewilderment by Richard Powers, China Room by Sunjeev Sahota, Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead, and Light Perpetual by Frances Spufford. Let's have a look what Maya Jasnoff, the chair of the 2021 judges, says. She says, one thing that unites these books is their power to absorb the reader in an unusual story, and to do so in an artful, distinctive voice. Okay, so we're looking for absorbing and unusual stories in a distinctive voice. That's a nice criteria, I like that. Many of them consider how people grapple with the past, with the personal experiences of grief or dislocation, or the historical legacies of enslavement, apartheid, and civil war. Many examine intimate relationships placed under stress, and through them meditate on ideas of freedom and obligation, or on what makes us human. Yeah, good. Enduring qualities and conditions of the human experience. It's particularly resonant during the pandemic to note that all of these books have important things to say about the nature of community, from the tiny and secluded to the unmeasurable expanse of cyberspace. Okay, that's pretty cool. Reading in lockdown fostered a powerful sense of connection with the books and of shared enterprise among the judges. Ah, that's interesting. Okay, so it was a lockdown year. So there's actually probably something quite exciting about getting a stack of tons of books and you are reading them with your crew, with some other judges. Probably people had a lot more time on their hands to power through them. So that's quite fun. Though we didn't always respond in the same way to an author's choices, every book on this list sparked long discussions among ourselves that led in unexpected and enlightening directions. There's a good criteria for a book is, does it spark discussion that can be endless? I like to think of books, you can tell if they're great if you can reread them. How many times can you reread them? But also, how endless is the discussion? If you can talk about a book for years and it can always take a different direction and it grows with you, then that's really good. We are excited to share a list that will appeal to many tastes, and we hope generate many more conversations as readers dig in. Now, Gabby Wood, director of the Booker Prize Foundation, adds this. In recent years, the Booker Prize long lists have drawn attention to various elements of novelty in the novel. That's the thing, is a lot of these modern writers, at least to me, they're trying to do things, I'm not saying anyone on the long list because I've not checked them out yet, falls into this category, but many novelists today, the contemporary novelists, are trying to do things that have already been done. Indeed, I think when Joyce's Ulysses first came out, many writers probably thought, oh, the novel's broken now. Perhaps the same thing for Proust's In Search of Lost Time, though when it first came out it wasn't well received. We now know, looking back, that together with Joyce Proust, they've both done extraordinary things to the novel. Where can one go from here, apart from perhaps pale imitations? I don't know. Maybe there is a way to energize the form. I think, though, that most writers today are trying to get to that sort of pre-Cervantine era of the picaresque, but like that's also already been done. So this year's list is more notable for the engrossing stories within it, for the geographical range of its points of view, and for its recognition of writers who have been working at an exceptionally high standard for many years. Some have already been rewarded with prizes, a Nobel here, a Pulitzer there. 2 are debut novelists. Many have fallen within the booker's orbit before. To see them brought together and to hear from them in these books is to know that literature is in the most capable and creative of hands. 5 novelists have been recognised by the prize before. Damon Galgut, shortlisted twice in 2006 for The Good Doctor and in 2010 for In a Strange Room. Kazuo Ishiguro, who won in 1989 for The Remains of the Day, shortlisted in 2005 for Never Let Me Go, in 2000 for When We Were Orphans, and in 1986 for An Artist of the Floating World. Ooh, they like Ishiguro. Mary Lawson, longlisted in 2006 for The Other Side of the Bridge. Richard Powers, shortlisted in 2018 for The Overstory and shortlisted in 2014 for Orfeo. And Sunjeev Sahota, shortlisted in 2015 for The Year of the Runaways. 6 of the longlisted books come from independent publishers: Bloomsbury, Granta, Faber, and Holland House Books. Faber has won the prize 7 times before. Okay, interesting. What else? The shortlist of 6 books will be announced on Tuesday the 14th of September. The shortlisted authors each receive £2,500 and a specially bound edition of their book. That's quite nice. The 2021 winner will be announced on Wednesday the 3rd of November in an awards ceremony held in partnership with the BBC and so on. Right, shall we get into the prizes? Not the prizes, the long list contenders. And we'll be starting with A Passage North. Okay, well, I'm going to read out the blurb for A Passage North and we'll check out some reviews of people who've already read the book. So, A Passage North begins with a message from out of the blue. A telephone call informing Krishan that his grandmother's caretaker, Rani, has died under unexpected circumstances. Found at the bottom of a well in her village in the north, her neck broken by the fall. The news arrives on the heels of an email from Anjum, an impassioned yet aloof activist Krishnan fell in love with years before while living in Delhi, stirring old memories and desires from a world he left behind. As Krishan makes the long journey by train from Colombo into the war-torn northern province of Rani's funeral, so begins an astonishing passage into the innermost reaches of a country, at once a powerful meditation on absence and longing, and an unsparing account of the legacy of Sri Lanka's 30-year civil war. This procession to a pyre at the end of the earth, I quite like that, lays bare the imprints of an island's past, the unattainable distances between who we are and what we seek. Written with precision and grace, Anouk Arudpragasm's masterful new novel is an attempt to come to terms with life in the wake of devastation, and a poignant memorial for those lost and those still alive. And there's the author Anouk, who studied philosophy in the US and received a doctorate at Columbia. This is not his first novel. Let's check out some reviews and what readers have said so far. Okay, this is a good review. It's a beautiful, understated novel, which I was keen to read after it was longlisted. On the surface, this is a very simple novel. In the first section of the novel, Krishan, a young man in Colombo. Okay, this is just a summary. What makes this novel so impressive is the sheer beauty of its writing. The author writes in long sentences, frequently as long as half a page, but these feel graceful and fluent rather than convoluted and tortuous, and they lend themselves to the extended and precise exploration of ideas such as time, memory, loss, and desire. The novel is full of staggeringly insightful observations. The novel does not flinch from the horrors of the Sri Lankan Civil War, in particular when describing the torture of Kutamani and his fellow separatist leaders. Someone else said it's an exquisite powerhouse of a profoundly moving, disturbing novel. philosophical, a meditation that, with its beautiful lyrical and understated prose, carries the capacity to break the reader as it details the broken soul of Sri Lanka. Yeah, well, it sounds like this is very much grounded in a bit of Sri Lankan history, and I don't know if many of us know a huge amount about Sri Lanka. So from that point of view, it might be an interesting book to learn about a country that perhaps many people don't know too much about. Reflections on War, set in the aftermath of the Civil War. A lot of reviews are just summaries. Beautiful yet disturbing. A Passage North is an introspective, meandering novel in which, and here comes a summary again, I love Rudbragasm's portrayals of interpersonal relationships, particularly that of Krishan with his fading grandmother. The novel has a measured pace, and psychological explorations mean it won't be a novel that appeals to everyone, though I was pleased to see it get recognition with the Longlist nomination. Okay, this is a haunting novel, beautiful yet disturbing. Okay, interesting. So that's that one. Let's look at the next. Let's check out Second Place. Okay, so this one is about a woman who invites a famed artist to visit the remote coastal region where she lives in the belief that his vision will penetrate the mystery of her life and landscape. Over the course of one hot summer, his provocative presence provides the frame for a study of female fate and male privilege, of the geometries of human relations, and of the struggle to live morally between our internal and external worlds. With its examination of the possibility that art can both save and destroy us, Second Place is deeply affirming of the human soul, while grappling with its darkest demons. About the author, Rachel Cusk. She's written a trilogy before and some memoirs. And she's a Guggenheim Fellow who lives in Paris. Let's see what people have said about this one. See some reviews. Okay. A life defined by others. A deliberate and often raw examination of self-identity. 4 stars. Presented as a collection of communications, perhaps from a series of letters, to someone only ever referred to as Jeffers. The novel opens when M visited... Okay, wait, no summary. I just want people to... This is the thing, right? This is my little... I wouldn't call it a pet peeve, but I think a book review should be your autobiography or your appreciation, your aesthetic appreciation, rather than a summary. So tell us something about how the book affected you or didn't affect you if you want to give a good review. Here's a bad review, 1 star. An intense stream of consciousness. I suppose what I look for in a novel is a good story with some characters I grow to like or even love. So this book wasn't for me. I'm reasonably bright, but found Rachel's meanderings pretty incomprehensible, and didn't they go on. This is the thing that I've noticed with most modern book prize winners, is that the style is always described as meandering. I mean, we're reading Proust over at the book club, deep reading it, and his style is definitely meandering as well. This is why I said it's kind of difficult to do something that hasn't already been done, like stream of consciousness. It's already been done, but I suppose it's okay to still use the techniques that others have pioneered, so long as you energize it or refresh it. I like reading before I go to sleep, and try to work on what on earth was going on was too difficult, and I gave up halfway through. Obviously, Rachel Cusk is clever and well liked, as are her books. I won't buy any of her other books, as I don't think she's an author that I would ever enjoy. Solipsistic ramblings, somebody else said. I think I'd better give up with Rachel Cusk. Her writing just isn't for me. I find it pretentious, self-indulgent and mannered, and I don't relate to any of her characters. This was very slightly, redeemed for me when I discovered that it's based on Mabel Dodge Luhan's account of the visit D.H. Lawrence made to her artist's colony in New Mexico in 1922. That's kind of interesting, but it wasn't enough to actually make me enjoy the novel. Okay. One of my books of the year, says someone else. This one's not as formally innovative as Cusk's Outline trilogy, but it's arguably a more challenging book with its existentialist probings and sheer smartness. It's so rich and dense that any easy summary escapes me, and plot, of course, isn't the point anyway. But I will say that I made 80 notes and annotations in a book less than 200 pages long. That's interesting. This is a novel just begging for a reread, and another read, a Desert Island book for sure. In some way, it reminded me of Plato's Dialogues, where characters contemplate complex ideas and different philosophical positions are in discussion. What's interesting about Plato, and we're going to do a series called Reading Plato as Imaginative Literature, the Poetry of Plato. If you ever find yourself like hesitant to agree with Plato, and he says some outrageous things, you should assure yourself that actually, I don't think most of the time he is working as a philosopher, he's working as a storyteller, a marvellous one. But we'll get into that some other time. Cusk's writing is fluent and graceful, such a pleasure to read, but incisive too, in the way it balances forward movement and the stasis of contemplation. Anyone like me has been waiting eagerly to see what she would do. After kudos can bring a sigh of relief. It's superb. Okay, cool. So mixed reviews on that one. Some people love it, some people hate it. Let's see what one we're going to look at next. We are going to look at The Promise by Damon Galgut, who they said that he won one before. The Promise charts the crash and burn of a white South African family living on a farm outside Pretoria. If you want some like apartheid literature, I started reading Riotous Assembly by Tom Sharp. It's really funny, and it does. It's quite informative about that pocket of history in the world. The Swarts are gathering for Ma's funeral. The younger generation, Anton and Amor, detest everything the family stand for, not least the failed promise to the black woman who's worked for them the whole life. After years of service, Salome was promised her own house, her own land, yet somehow as each decade passes, that promise remains unfulfilled. The narrator's eye shifts and blinks, moving fluidly between characters. Sounds a bit Faulknerian. Flying into their dreams, and deliciously lethal in its observation, and as the country moves from old deep divisions to its new so-called fairer society, the lost promise of more than just one family hovers behind the novel story. In the story of a diminished family, sharp and tender emotional truths hit home. Confident, deft and quietly powerful. Literary fiction at its finest. And here's Damon, a novelist who's been published in 16 languages, shortlisted twice, and a previous winner. Okay. And he lives and works in Cape Town. Okay, that explains the South African interest. Let's check out what people have said about this one. This one, which is currently unavailable. No light and shade in this book, 3 stars. This was a book chosen by my book group. I found it difficult to read due to lack of paragraphs, conversation and chapters. I read in the evenings and there was never an obvious place to stop. Well, you won't like Proust either then. I felt as if it was being read to me by someone with a monotonous voice. There was no light and shade in it. I thought that the storyline was interesting, but as soon as the husband died, hey man, what's with the spoilers? Come on. No, okay, 3 stars. Not as good as his other work. Okay, that looks like there could be a spoiler there. Confusing to me, 2 stars. A promise elicited from her husband. I'm afraid I got lost in the complicated family interactions as the narrative does hop around a good bit. Someone else calls it bleak and beautiful, 5 stars. Trying to tell the problematic history of a country via a single family, cursed family. Alright, that's kind of, okay, not a knockout for people reviewing it. Let's see who we're doing next. The Sweetness of Water. In the dying days of the American Civil War, newly freed brothers Landry and Prentice find themselves cast into the world without a penny to their names. Forced to hide out in the woods near their former Georgia plantation, they're soon discovered by the land's owner, George Walker, a man still reeling from the loss of his son in the war. When the brothers begin to live and work on George's farm, the tentative bonds of trust and union begin to blossom between the strangers. But this sanctuary survives on a knife's edge, and it isn't long before the inhabitants of the nearby town of Old Ox react with fury at the alliances being formed only a few miles away, conjuring a world fraught with tragedy and violence, yet threaded through with hope. The Sweetness of Water is a debut novel, unique in its power to move and enthrall. And here's Nathan. He's a Missioner Fellow at the University of Texas, awarded the Kidd Prize as judged by Anthony Durr, and was a finalist for the Tennessee Williams Fiction Prize. And this is his debut. Let's check out what people are saying about this debut, The Sweetness of Water. Okie dokie. Intelligent, evocative, rich and glorious. It's a real joy, beautifully written book. Its characters will engage your heart and sweep you off your feet. Okay, that's good. Simply so superb. Nathan Harris has written a book which is quite simply unputdownable. The characters he creates will live with the reader long after the story is told. Gripping story, thought-provoking and unforgettable. This guy's got some good reviews. You can always tell when people have enjoyed it because they take a picture of their book. Anyone who's enjoying a book always takes a picture of their book, either showing themselves or just showing the book. Profoundly moving story of slave emancipation. It's really inventive. He's created a story that's both modern and absolutely of its time. That's pretty cool. The comparisons with Colson Whitehead, yeah, that's kind of what I thought when I saw this. The cover looks similar as well. Are justified, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Harris writes next. That's an advance copy in exchange for a review. Some of those reviews can't be trusted, I must say. Some wonderfully impressive writing, says this person, but heavy going at times. Well, yes, of course. Beautifully written, mesmerising and cinematic, someone else says. All right, that's interesting. Next up, who have we got? We have Clara and the Sun. Is this Ishiguro? Yes, it is. Okay. From her place in the store, Clara, an artificial friend with outstanding observational qualities, watches carefully the behaviour of those who come in to browse and of those who pass in the street outside. She remains hopeful that a customer will soon choose her. I like this idea. But when the possibility emerges that her circumstances may change forever, Clara is warned not to invest too much in the promises of humans. In Clara and the Sun, Kazuo Ishiguro looks at our rapidly changing modern world through the eyes of an unforgettable narrator to explore a fundamental question. What does it mean to love? Ooh, I'll read this one. So Ishiguro, born in Nagasaki in 1954, moved to Britain when he was 5. You all know who Ishiguro is. Let's look at the reviews if there are any of this one. Clara and the Sun. I'm probably going to get this one. It sounds cool. A modern masterpiece, and look, people are taking pictures holding the book. The cover looks lovely. Here's the thing: you've got a time now where you can now nab for no cost at all, really, a first edition. So if you're interested in these books, you should just grab a first edition because they'll be worth some money someday. You know, not that you probably want to sell them, but. Someone called it a modern masterpiece. Someone said, sometimes fascinating, sometimes dull. A tale of androids, robots, and artificial friends. They make the inference with Philip K. Dick. That's what I was thinking. I kept going with this because it was Kazuo Ishiguro and does contain some fine passages, but it was a bit disappointing. Someone else said it was stunning, profound, beautiful. Discover it for yourself. You'll be glad you did. Someone said it's an okay read. I couldn't emotionally connect to any of these characters and found them lifeless, empty and superficial. This could be intentional and reflect the narrative viewpoint of the robot. I think it probably would be intentional if that's the case. But I felt this world and its inhabitants were flat, devoid of real emotions, so that I was fully detached by the end. Here's the thing is I don't think you have to completely connect with characters in the book. But of course we do enjoy it when we do. Isn't that interesting that we want to identify with characters? I always find that interesting. I wasn't challenged by the themes, and if I was 13, I may have felt the same way. But they finished it, and their mind does keep returning to it even a few days later. I just wanted a bit more realism, detail, explanation of the dystopian world it was set in, character depth, and more explicit moral discussion. I feel somewhat empty. I feel gutted not to love this book. Okay, well, I'm going to check it out. Other people said it's beautiful and superb, brilliant and moving, emotionally gripping. Cool, I'll grab this one. I'm very curious about this. Let's see who else is on the long list. We have An Island. Okay, Samuel has lived alone for a long time. One morning he finds the sea has brought someone to offer companionship and to threaten his solitude. A young refugee washes up unconscious on the beach of a small island inhabited by no one but Samuel, an old lighthouse keeper. Unsettled, Samuel is soon swept up in memories of his former life on the mainland, a life that saw his country suffer under colonisers, then fight for independence, only to fall under the rule of a cruel dictator. He now recalls his own part in its history. That's quite interesting. In this new man's presence, he begins to consider, as he did in his youth, what is meant by land and to whom should it belong? To what lengths will a person go in order to ensure that what is theirs will not be taken from them? A novel about guilt, fear, friendship and rejection, about the meaning of home. And here's Karen. She's a South African author. She's written before. And she's living in Brazil, and she recently completed a postdoctoral research at the Federal University of Goiás on the historical relationship between science and literature. That's interesting, with a focus on eusocial insects. She runs a mentorship program run by the Short Story Day Africa, promoting writing in Africa. She's interested in colonialism, historically, and in the lasting impact that it had on the continent of Africa and its beyond it. Let's look at some reviews for this one, yeah? Okay. Currently unavailable as well. This always happens with the bookers. Like, you want to check out a book and you can't even get it. I wonder why. Intriguing character-driven story that packs a lot into 182 pages. That's short, so, you know, why not? An affecting read. At just 182 pages, An Island is a fairly short novel. All these reviews, man. Wonderful Crusoe update. Packing a huge amount into 100... Well, all these reviews, like, paid for? Did they get given an advanced reading copy or some shit? Like, they keep saying its length. How often do you say the length of a book? Like, or just make it the prime focus of your review? I don't know. The premise is similar to Robinson Crusoe. Well, that's interesting. An intense, powerful read, beautifully written. Okay, let's check out the next one on the long list, which is called A Town Called Solace by Mary Lawson. Clara's sister is missing. Angry, rebellious Rose had a row with their mother, stormed out of the house and simply disappeared. 8-year-old Clara, isolated by her distraught parents' effort to protect her from the truth, is grief-stricken and bewildered. Liam Kane, newly divorced, newly unemployed, newly arrived in the small northern town, moves into the house next door. A house left to him by an old woman he can barely remember, and within hours gets a visit from the police. It seems he's suspected of a crime. At the end of her life, Elizabeth Orchard is thinking about crime too, one committed 30 years ago that had tragic consequences for 2 families, and in particular 1 small child. She desperately wants to make amends before she dies. Set in northern Ontario in 1972, the novel explores the relationships of these 3 people brought together by fate and the mistakes of the past. By turns gripping and darkly funny, it uncovers the layers of grief and remorse and love that connect us but shows that sometimes a new life is possible. And here's Mary Lawson, Canadian author. She's obviously written novels before. She's been longlisted and selected for the Richard and Judy Book Club. Okay, yeah, all right, let's see what people have said about this one. It looks quite interesting. What's interesting as well, when you go and look at the the Amazon listings, they all stick it in the title, longlisted for the Booker Prize. But yeah, that's understandable. Okay, people have said, best book I've read this year. This is the most delightful book. I enjoyed it so much I did not want the story to end. And here comes some summary. Deeply affecting, beautifully written, a very fine novel. It's an exquisite novel, the fruit of an exceptional sensibility. Mary Lawson has become a great favourite since her debut with Crow Lake. There are very few contemporary writers in English who can approach anything like the natural ease, subtlety and intelligence that marks this novel. An unmitigated delight. Someone else says it's wonderful, quiet, beautifully written, telling the truth about love. Okay, this book is at once heartbreaking and uplifting because it is true. And there's a couple of 3 stars that also say that it's a moving and sensitive narrative. Okay, cool, interesting. Let's check out the next one. No one is talking about this. A woman known for her viral social media posts travels the world, speaking to her adoring fans, her entire existence overwhelmed by the internet, or what she terms the portal. Are we in hell? The people of the portal ask themselves. Who are we serving? Are we all just going to keep doing this until we die? Suddenly, 2 texts from her mother pierce the fray. Something has gone wrong, and how soon can you get here? As real life and its stakes collide with the increasing absurdity of the portal, the woman confronts a world that seems to contain both an abundance of proof that there is goodness, empathy and justice in the universe, and a deluge of evidence to the contrary. Sincere and delightfully profane, this book is a love letter to the infinite scroll and a meditation on love, language and human connection from one of the most original voices of our time. Okay, and that's Patricia Lockwood there. She is the author of 2 poetry collections. Okay, let's check out some reviews for this one, yeah? The first part of this odd book reveals a rather highly strung woman who writes for... Okay, we're going to skip summaries. The writing is poetic in tone and makes some interesting points about the nature of the internet, the way it loves to judge, simplify, divide and mislead. What I would say is that's not the internet's fault. That's human nature. So the internet's just a tool and humans are using it as expected. I like the line about a woman joining social media to see pictures of her grandson and ended up believing in a flat earth. Okay. That's interesting. I don't know if I enjoyed this book. The second half is harsh and upsetting, so much so that I could barely continue reading. It would also take someone more internet savvy than me to get all the references and in-jokes. Okay. Worth persevering with, someone else says. I'll have to read this one again, someone else says, to really do it justice. I gulped it down in one yesterday. That's interesting. There is much that could be said about how this book shows us to ourselves, but more to be learned by reading it than reading about it. Yeah. Strange segues and loses its hook, someone else says. Great book, awful cover. Cares about the cover. Come on. A new style of writing. A well-written book, but I prefer a more traditional format, probably because I'm not into today's way of communicating online. Okay, let's look at the next one. There's a ton in the long list, isn't there? The Booker Dozen, as they're calling it. The Fortune Man. Mahmoud Matan is a fixture in Cardiff's Tiger Bay 1952, which bustles with Somali and West Indian sailors, Maltese businessmen and Jewish families. He's a father, a chancer, and sometimes petty thief. He's many things, in fact, but he's not a murderer. So when a shopkeeper is brutally killed and all eyes fall on him, Mahmoud isn't too worried. It's true that he's been getting into trouble more often since his Welsh wife Laura left him, but Mahmoud is secure in his innocence in a country where he thinks justice is served. Yeah, it is only in the run-up to the trial, as the prospect of freedom dwindles, that it will dawn on Mahmoud that he's in a terrifying fight for his life. That's Kafkaesque, isn't it? Against conspiracy, prejudice, and the inhumanity of the state, and under the shadow of the hangman's noose, he begins to realise the truth may not be enough to save him. Here's Nadifa Mohammed, who was born in 81 in Hargeisa, Somaliland. She moved to London when she was 4. She's the author of several books. She's won some prizes like the Somerset Maugham Prize, and she was named one of Granta's Best of Young British Novelists in 2013, and she seems to write for The Guardian and the BBC. Let's check out what people are saying about The Fortune Man, which does seem quite good. Moving. I chose this book as it was recommended by The Times. Okay. Brilliant read, had me in tears at the end. I feel like I've lived among the various characters of all shapes and sizes in Tiger Bay. Have come to know Mahmoud and his story of injustice. That's good if you feel like you're living with the characters. I laughed, winced, worried and sobbed when reading this book. A page turner for sure. Wow, what an amazing read. I love a story when it can help readers paint a vivid picture. Someone else says it's a fine example of why the death penalty should never be reinstated. Yeah, I'm not one for the death penalty either, personally. One of the most interesting parts... You know what? I'm not going to read out spoilers. What could have made this book less tedious would have been a startling revelation of who really did it. No spoilers, please. Vivid story of injustice, an exceptionally poignant story, says somebody else. What an amazing historical fiction novel, not at all what I was expecting. The book covers issues of prejudice with sensitivity, the hardship of life for some in this Welsh community, a reality. The book is based upon real-life events. It's a very absorbing novel that's beautifully and respectfully written, whilst also being a page-gripping mystery that will keep you saying just one more chapter. Okay, cool. Let's check out the next one, which happens to be Bewilderment. Theo Byrne is a promising... Is it Byrne? Byron? A promising young astrobiologist who has found a way to search for life on other planets, dozens of light years away. He is also the widowed father of a most unusual 9-year-old. His son Robin is funny, loving and filled with plans. He thinks and feels deeply, adores animals and can spend hours painting elaborate pictures. He's also on the verge of being expelled from 3rd grade for smashing his friend's face with a metal thermos. Sounds like a good one. What can a father do when the only solution offered to his rare and troubled boy is to put him on psychoactive drugs? What can he say when his boy comes to him wanting an explanation for a world that's clearly in love with its own destruction? The only thing for it is to take the boy to other planets, all while fostering his desperate campaign to help save this one. I quite like that. You can probably tell some of my personal taste here. It leans speculative science fiction. And here's Richard, the author of 12 novels previously, and he was shortlisted for the Booker before and won the Pulitzer. Very nice. And he was on the bestseller, the New York Times bestseller, for 68 weeks. Also the recipient of a MacArthur Fellowship and National Book Award. Lives in the foothills of the Great Smoky Mountain. Let's check out the reviews. That one sounds good, man. Let's see what people have said. Okay. There's no reviews. What? There's no reviews. That's crazy. It's not even released? Okay, well... Okay, that's a shame. I'll order it though, but I don't know how they can... They always do this with the Booker. They always review or shortlist or longlist something that the public can't even get hold of. But that one does sounds good to me, so I'll check that one out. Okay, China Room. Miha, a young bride in rural 1929 Punjab, is trying to discover the identity of her new husband. She and her sisters-in-law, married to 3 brothers in a single ceremony, spend their days hard at work in the family's China Room, sequestered from contact with the men. This sounds good. When Miha develops a theory as to which of them is hers, a passion is ignited that will put more than one life at risk. Spiralling around Miha's story is that of a young man who, in 1999, travels from England to the now deserted farm, its China Room locked and barred. In enforced flight from the traumas of his adolescence, his experiences of addiction, racism, and estrangement from the culture of his birth, he spends a summer in painful contemplation and recovery, finally finding the strength to return home. And here is Sanjeev, already an author of previous books, shortlisted before, won the International Dylan Thomas Prize, Sunday Times Young Writer of the Year Award, and many more. He lives in Sheffield and was also chosen as one of Granta's Best of Young British Novelists in 2013. Let's see if this one has any reviews. Because it sounds pretty good, to be honest. Enjoyable, 2 stories in one, a most fulfilling read. I had no idea the author had even been nominated for the Booker. I took a chance, so that's always good. A marvellous book, exactly what one hopes to stumble upon. It's a simple tale, I suppose, simply told, but the times and characters are also simple. That's not to say the characters lack depth, quite the opposite, or that the subject matter is not very moving. A most fulfilling read. I like the sound of this one too. Beautifully written and poignant. I enjoyed the dual narrative in the book. A heart-stopping novel, hard to put down. What a book, this one says. And they're not going to give spoilers, but they say it's one of those rare books where once you finish it, you're in a daze, surprised the world around you is still the same, oblivious to what's just happened, to the intensity you've just lived through. Someone else says it's a novel that stays with you, beautiful book. Okay, sounds good. I like that one. Let's look at the next on the long list. We're getting through them. This one's called Great Circle. In 1920s Montana, a wild-hearted orphan, Marion Graves, spends her days roaming the rugged forests and mountains of her home. When she witnesses the roll, loop and dive of 2 barnstorming pilots, she promises herself that one day she too will take to the skies. Years later, after a series of reckless romances and a spell flying to aid the British war effort, Marion embarks on a treacherous flight around the globe to search of the freedom she has always craved. She's never seen again. More than half a century later, Hadley Baxter, a troubled Hollywood starlet beset by scandal, is irresistibly drawn to play Marion Graves in her biopic, a role that will lead her to probe the deepest mysteries of the vanished pilot's life. And that's Maggie Shipstead right there, a prize winner, Dylan Thomas Prize, had books out before, graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop, that's cool. A former Wallace Stegner Fellow at Stanford. She lives in Los Angeles, so this is her 3rd book. Let's see what people are saying about this one. Okay, Great Circle. Reviews are... One says disappointing. Perhaps it's too early to judge the book having only read the first 200 pages. The story I've read so far just has so many similarities with this other book. It doesn't feel original. 600-page Turner that you're sad to finish. This big novel is fascinating on many levels. Firstly, as a piece of masterly fiction creating characters and storylines that you really care about. Secondly, as a brilliantly researched insight into the art of flying. Thirdly, as a historical insight into some of the last century's biggest events. And finally, a searing indictment of 21st century icon worship. Can't recommend enough. Someone else says, you must read this. Someone else said it's a sweeping saga. Really enjoyed listening to it on Audible. Well written, ambitious book. Okay, cool. Let's check out the next one. I think we only have one more. This one is called Light Perpetual. November 1944. A German rocket strikes London and 5 lives are atomized in an instant. November 1944. That rocket never lands. A single second in time is altered and 5 young lives go on to experience all the unimaginable changes of the 20th century. Because maybe there are always other futures, other chances. Intriguing, very short. This is Francis, the author of 5 highly praised works of non-fiction, frequently described by reviewers as bizarre or brilliant. I like that. His debut novel won the Costa Award. He's won a few others, Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction, Okay. In 2007, he was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, and he teaches writing at Goldsmiths College, University of London. He lives near Cambridge. Let's see what people have said about this one. Okay, A Damp Squib. They loved another one of his books and were keenly anticipating this one. Damp Squib is harsh. I didn't understand why they kept... Hey, man, come on. No spoilers. What the... Come on. I don't know why people do this. Do you know what bugs me as well? Like, I've noticed lecturers do this. Lecturers will talk to you, get you really excited about a novel or a work, and they talk to you like you've never read the book before. Or readers who have never read this book before are going to love it. And then they tell you what happens on the last page. Astounding and affecting, someone else says. A disappointment, someone else says. I feel the scope of narrating 5 lives in the one book was a step too far. It made following the lives, which didn't interact a lot, quite difficult for me. Perhaps 5 books would have been a better idea to show how life treated. I don't know, man. David Mitchell, Cloud Atlas, like, people can do that interweaving stuff quite well. Not what I hoped, someone else said. They bought it on the basis of a good review, some good writing, finding that elusive line of light. The prose kicks and jolts across page space, drawing attention to its own unique form, and that's important. A novel based on what if. Okay, interesting premise, but left me cold. This is not so much a novel as a set of interlocking short stories. Premise was interesting, but the end result left me unsatisfied. Someone else gave it a 5-star. Someone else gave it a 4. They had high expectations, but it didn't have a payoff. Okay, interesting. So for me, China Room, Bewilderment and the Ishiguro one sort of pique my curiosity the most. But I'm going to check them all out. I'll probably order those 3 in hardback, and I'll get some samples of the other ones. And if I can stick with them, if they capture me in the sample, I'll buy the full thing. So I'm going to give them all a fair crack. And I will let you know which one I think will be... I'll let you know what I think the shortlist will be, and I'll even give it a crack at ascertaining the winner. I already have a brief idea, but I think with these sorts of things, you have to read it yourself a little bit, put your mind in the position of the judges. But I would be very intrigued to know what you think of the long list. Were there any books that you know of that should have been on the list that perhaps weren't? Do you like any of the stories? Which book on the long list do you most want to read? Indeed, do you not want to read any of them? Do you want to read all of them? What do you think about book prize lists in general, or the booker? Are you a fan? Let me know, and we'll do another recap video in a little way down the road where I can inform you which one I think might win, and I'll let you know which ones have aesthetic merit and so on. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video today. If you liked it, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. Have a lovely day and happy reading.